Hi guys, it's Mark from Lightmap, and I'm going to show you the new area lights feature in HDR Light Studio 5.3. This demo is going to be with Maya and V-Ray. So we have the HDR Light Studio connection panel open, and it has found the V-Ray dome light in the scene. So this is we're able to start HDR Light Studio, and then it will be connected to that dome light. Great. So the next thing we're going to do is just export the scene from Maya into HDR Light Studio. Okay, and drag and drop a couple of lights to light the shot. And if we go back to Maya and do a IPR, you can see this shot is lit with the lighting. So the HDRI map in HDR Light Studio is being shared with Maya and V-Ray, and this is the normal workflow. So if you're an existing user, this is totally what you're used to doing. So let's go and look at the new area light feature. So let's pick this softbox, and we can see that the mapping for the light is 3D. So if you have 3D mapping, this option for area light will show up, and if we click this, a few things are going to happen. So let's click that. So what's happened is you'll see in the light list that the text for the light has gone to this yellow with the word area light after, so you know it's an area light. The render view did update, but it looks extremely similar to before. That's because an area light has been created quite a distance from the subject, and the visual effect will be very similar to when that light was actually on the HDRI map, and that's deliberate. So when you first promote that area light, the shot doesn't totally change how it looks. We'll come on to how to set the distance of that light shortly. You'll see on the canvas that the light is still there. Now, the light has actually been removed from the HDRI map that is lighting this shot, and that is inside of Maya and V-Ray. So if I come across to Maya, and we've got our IPR view still there, what we will see in the outliner is that a new folder has been created called HDRLS Area Lights, and if we open that up, we can see that that light is named here HDRLS Large Rect Softbox, and that's the same as the name of the light here in HDR Light Studio. So as we work in HDR Light Studio, then the lighting is updated instantly inside of Maya, and the renderer can show this. So I'll just pause the IPR. We'll go back to HDR Light Studio. So essentially, the light is an area light, but we still show it on the canvas. So the canvas is like a view of the world from the origin. So you'll see the distant HDRI map contents, but you'll also see the area lights on here as well. So as we start to move them in 3D space, then the size and the position of these is going to change quite a lot, because we're literally looking from the center of the world outwards and seeing those area lights. Okay, so in terms of how we move area lights and control them, it's very similar to what existing users are used to. So we can click and position the lights using Light Paint, and to all intents and purposes, the light still feels like it's on the HDRI map, but it isn't, it's an area light. So in 5.3 also, we can drag around on the model and get instant updates, which is really useful. So let's position this light in 3D now. So when you promote a light to an area light, the transform section gets these new controls for the area light, which actually are quite simple. The main control you want to use is Smart Dolly. This controls both the distance the light is away from the light paint position, and it also scales it using an algorithm which depends on the mode that the light has been placed. So with reflection mode, I'm going to scale, use this smart dolly to bring the light closer. I'm also going to turn off the other lights so we can see just the effect of that area light. So you can see as I use this smart dolly, the light appears to get closer and further away, which is what it's doing, but it's also scaling at the same time. Let's to make this easier to see, let's turn on the camera visibility for the light, and then you can see it in the render view. So if I dolly that light in, it's essentially moving towards the light paint position, and it's scaling. Now in reflection mode, it will scale to maintain the solid angle. The result is that the intensity of the lighting will be constant whatever distance away that light is. Essentially, the further away the light is, the softer the shadows and the more of the scene is lit by that light, and then the closer the light gets, the harder the shadows and the less of the scene is lit, because it's only pointing at this area. We created Smart Dolly to avoid what you would see here. So in conjunction with Smart Dolly, we have a dolly multiplier. As the name suggests, when you use this control, it will change the distance without doing any scaling. Okay, so if I was to use dolly multiply and move the light further away, already the light is staying the same size, but is virtually invisible because we're not scaling it. So if we didn't come up with Smart Dolly, what would happen is you would move the light and then you would scale it, and then you would move it and then you would scale it, and you'd be going to and fro. So we came up with Smart Dolly so that you basically set the size that you want the light in the reflection, let's say, and if you're happy with that, you can then just adjust this lighting effect using the Smart Dolly, which will scale it for you, which is really handy. So so in here, these controls, so as explained, how the light was placed will determine the algorithm used with Smart Dolly. So this applies to your different light paint modes, but also if light paint was used at all. So if I just dragged and dropped a light on the canvas and I promoted that to an area light, we'll see that the context is world origin. What this basically means is that light's never been placed using a light paint mode. Therefore, the light is pointing at the origin of the scene. So as I drag and move that light around, it will behave very much like it was on the HDRI map. Okay, so, and as I Smart Dolly in, it will dolly towards the origin, not towards a light paint position. And you can see here where it says light paint pos, these are greyed out because that light is not pointing at a light paint position, it's pointing at the origin. So if I just was to get this light now, which is active, and use light paint to position it with reflection mode and click on here, now the context for this light has been updated to reflection. So the light knows it's been placed using reflection mode. Therefore, Smart Dolly knows that when we dolly that light in, to scale it to maintain the solid angle. That's the default behavior for a light placed with reflection mode. And I can just turn the light on. Please note, when you turn the visibility on, if you have a large model, then there will be slower performance in the render view when you're manipulating the light and moving it. So with camera visibility off, then the updates will be much quicker with a very large model. So just a pointer there. So this light's been placed with reflection mode, and Smart Dolly is scaling it to maintain the angle. So the light paint position is literally recording the coordinates of where we've clicked on the model. So what this means is if we wanted to move this light up a bit, we could adjust these coordinates to kind of nudge the light in 3D space. Okay, But if we just come and we click on somewhere else on the model, then those get totally reset. So you probably won't use these controls that often, but if you've got a light just in a certain place and you just want to nudge it up a bit, you might find doing a light paint click or a drag will not actually get the light where you want, perhaps because you want it pointing in a certain place and you just want to nudge it. So those light paint positions can be useful. So okay, what about if we place a light with rim mode? So let's get this light and add it to the scene, and then use the rim mode and click on there. Now the light is directly behind the model. Let's promote it to an area light. Now we can see here the context has been set to rim. So what will happen is if we just make that light visible, and if we scale it down in size somewhat, and let's just click again behind here. So we've got an area light now that we are positioning using the rim lighting mode. So essentially it's positioning the light so that from the camera view it is behind the object where I click. So with Smart Dolly, when the context is rim, as you move this light, it will actually move towards the camera and maintain its size. So as you can see there, look, as I use that slider, that light is maintaining where it is relative to this view and how big it is, but it lets me alter the proximity of that light to the object. So I could click over here and I start dragging, and then that moves through the surface, through the kettle, and even right up to me. So that's how the light, an area light, will be automatically scaled when using Smart Dolly. If we place this light using illumination mode, then let's just solo the light and scale it up a bit and turn off the reflectivity. So we're just looking at illumination, pure illumination. So as I click on the top of the model, the area light is placed normal to where I click, and you'll see here with Smart Dolly, as I drag that, the actual illumination level here where I clicked is maintained because the light is being scaled to maintain the illumination. And then as I bring it closer, you can see still the brightness is very similar in that location. So effectively, when the distance is doubled, we double the size of the light to combat the quadratic fall off. That's effectively what we're doing, so that the light maintains its brightness. So Smart Dolly is really handy because what it means is you can just concentrate on positioning light, adjusting the effect, whether it's close or far away, and not keep fiddling about jumping between the sliders to scale it and to move it closer. That's what Smart Dolly is about. So let's just delete these lights, turn this back on, and let's just place a few light sources around here and promote them to area lights. Choose their proximity. And let's just duplicate that again. Put one there, scale it up a bit. One here, scale that up a bit. And on this one, let's cut it in half using a gradient. Okay, so in terms of the alpha, you'll see that HDR Light Studio creates RGBA data for each of the light cards, just as it would do if the light was on the HDRI map. But in this case, the data is being mapped onto the card. And you can see that we have alpha here, but we essentially pre-multiply that alpha on the content when we show it in our render view. And you'll also notice that on the rear of the area light, we also show the content. This is deliberate so that you can easily identify your lights when you're looking at them from behind. If I was to go into the Maya project, we'll see that those two area lights we currently have are made. You'll see that the light I'm adjusting is selected. And if I set off an IPR Okay, you can see that I'm looking at this light from behind. You can see the alpha is being correctly honoured in V-Ray here, and that because I'm looking at behind, the back of the light is black. And if I go to Light Studio and move that so the light is there, the light's behind now, go back to Maya, the light's behind, you can see the alpha controlling that edge. And if we go to Light Studio, we could say drag that down so it's a softer edge here, and then you can see this updates in V-Ray. There we go. So everything you do in Light Studio is updating inside of Maya as you work. Now, we share a proxy version of the HDRI map, and we also share proxy versions of the area lights. So when you are happy with your lighting, we'll actually finish by doing a production render, and that will include the HDRI map and the content of the area lights. So let's just go back, and I'm going to just put a few different light sources around here, and let's change the color of that. Let's just duplicate and put one more light. Okay, so if we wanted, we could save this lighting project from within HDR Light Studio, so it could be loaded at any point into any project. Let's do that, and we'll come back to this file later. So desktop, let's just call it test, save that. We'll come back to this later. So if we go back to Maya, we've got all this lighting, it's all been updated, and at any point we can stop HDR Light Studio. It will close, and here we've got a Maya scene, and it's got these lights in, and they're built from standard Maya V-Ray components. So this project, once we've rendered our production render, could be passed on to anyone in the pipeline. They wouldn't need HDR Light Studio installed. So let's start HDR Light Studio again. Okay, and what you'll see is that the lighting, so the embedded project data that is on this node in Maya, that gets loaded into HDR Light Studio, and then in turn that lighting, including the area lights, is synchronized back into Maya. So the 3D model was only sent as a temporary file, so that hasn't updated, so we would need to re-export the model if we wanted to see this lighting on it. But what we're going to do now is I'm going to stop HDR Light Studio, so it closes, and I'm going to delete these area lights. So there's no area lights in the scene, but we still have our HDRLS project data. What will happen now is if I start HDR Light Studio, just like before, the project, embedded project from Maya will be loaded into HDR Light Studio, and then in turn that lighting is created in Maya. So you'll see here the HDRLS area lights folder has been created, which contains the lighting. So if we were to stop HDR Light Studio, and if we were to delete both the area lights and the project data, what would happen now is Light Studio, the connection would create a new project data node in Maya. We would open, and there would be no lighting, just the default gradient. That's what you'd expect. But we could go and load that project we saved earlier. So if I open project, open that test, so these lights are loaded back in from as we had them before, and if you look back in Maya, the lighting has been reconstructed. So essentially HDR Light Studio has the lighting design, and the Maya connection we've created embeds that project data, and recreates the lighting when that project is loaded in HDR Light Studio. So I've kind of shown you those things just so you understand how it actually works. If you do things like rename these lights and start messing with the ones that are created by HDR Light Studio, that can cause issues, so I would suggest not renaming them. The only parameters of the lights that we control are related to the content of the area light, so the image that is mapped to it we control, the fall off we control, and the camera visibility. These two are obviously dependent on if your renderer supports those, and we control its position. Any other controls to do with the area light, those can be messed with in Maya and set, and those will not be set by HDR Light Studio in any way. The only way in which they would be reset is if you deleted lights and HDR Light Studio started and it recreated the lighting from scratch. So an example of what you might control is, let's go to this light, and you might adjust the sampling on individual light sources. As long as we won't touch that at all, the only things we touch are the things that I've actually mentioned. So we have quite a light touch when it comes to what we actually control. So let's assume we're totally happy with this lighting we've created, and the final step is to render the lighting. So what I'll do just first is I will just sync the scene back up, because it is a bit weird looking at HDR Light Studio without the scene. So let's just pop that across. Let's go back. So you can see how the lighting is lighting that now, and I'll turn our reflections back on. Okay, so let's do a production render of our lighting design. So we come here to the HDR button for a production render. We set the resolution of the HDRI map, which leave that at 1500. We have the resolution of the area light themselves, which we only set the width because they're always square, so it's 1000 by 1000. Let's leave that as it is. And then let's browse and choose a file name. So on the desktop, let's put demo lights. Save, and then we press the render button, and this will calculate the set of image data for your Maya scene. So it will calculate the HDRI map and all of the light cards. And if I was to just look at my file system and go to my desktop, you can now see that we have each of the area lights, and in this case we have the alpha maps for them, and we have the RGB maps, and then we have the HDRI map as well, and that's all being produced as a set of imagery. And Maya has been updated to not use the proxy and to use that final content. So if at this point I stopped HDR Light Studio, my design is embedded in HDRLS project data, and all of my lights are pointing at production quality images on the drive. So I could actually save this project, and I could put it on the render farm or hand it to somebody else in the studio to use, and they would be able to render this and work on this project, and they wouldn't even need HDR Light Studio installed at all on their computer. So that's how to use the new area lights out with the Maya connection, and thank you very much for watching. Cheers.